up guys, it's Griffin and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am actually kind of nervous to sit down and film because it's been a minute since I've done one of these videos and I put a ton of time and effort into this one, so I'm nervous but excited. For today's video, I'm covering another case/murder mystery. And this one is a little different compared to the other ones that I have covered on my channel because this one is solved. I have covered one other case that was technically solved or in the process of being solved. However, there was no body found and it's nothing like this case whatsoever. Today we are covering the unfortunate case of Emma Walker and her stalker ex-boyfriend. I am pretty eager to cover this case for a few reasons, and if you want to skip these reasons, I also totally understand because I, as someone watching this video, would maybe skip the reasons, but I wanted to let you guys know a few things before I got started. So this timestamp will be the actual timestamp that I start the mystery at. But now I want to explain why I chose to do this case in particular. First, I truly believe there are a lot of life lessons to be taken away from this case, and I am someone who tries my best to learn from others' mistakes, and reading up on these cases, I believe I've learned a lot. So hopefully you guys can take something away from this case. Number two, I was recently at Playlist Live and multiple people came up to me and specifically requested for me to do this case. I had seen it in my comments before, but I knew that other people had covered the case, so I wasn't entirely sure if it was something I wanted to do because I didn't know if I could add anything to it. So that's why I decided to not watch any of the other creators' videos on this case so I can kind of come at it with my own set of eyes. There's just very few factual sources. So I'm sure we ran into a lot of the same information, and maybe I found something that someone else didn't, which is the goal. I did a lot of research on this case. I have been spending so much time on it, and it really is inspiring me to get back into my cases. So with that being said, please use the comment section of this video to suggest cases to me, and pay attention to the comments. If someone else suggested a case that you also want me to cover, make sure to give that comment a thumbs up and maybe comment on it why you want me to cover it. And even though I did a lot of research on this case, in case I missed out on any information, please feel free to leave it in the comment section and I will pin it to the top, or I will add it to the description of the YouTube box if there is a lot of information. So without further ado, let's get into this week's video. Emma Walker was born on March 20th in the year 2000 in Knoxville, Tennessee. Her direct family consisted of her brother Evan and her parents Mark and Jill Walker. In some ways, after doing just like even a little bit of research, like within 10 minutes, I could kind of connect personally to Emma, and she seemed to be someone who had big goals and was always trying to be a big part of the community and do whatever she could for people. And growing up, that's very much how I was. I was a part of literally every school club, class president, all those shindigs I was a part of. So this kind of reminds me of me in a way, and as she got older, one of her dream jobs was to become a neonatal nurse, a profession that entails working with premature babies or sick newborn infants. I think when someone growing up has something like that in mind as their career goal, it speaks measures about them as a person, and I think that this made complete sense based off the type of person she was. Emma was described as a bright, vibrant person who lived life to the fullest, always wanted everyone to be happy, and attracted amazing, wonderful friends in her life. In the fall of 2014, Emma began her freshman year at Central High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. Right away, she joined cheer squad, which was actually insane because, at least with my school and a lot of schools around me growing up, it's nearly impossible to be a cheerleader as a freshman, but she did it. If that were me personally, that would be a huge confidence booster because I did try to do that when I was in high school and I didn't succeed, but she did, so that was awesome for her, and I'm sure a lot of her friends were really proud and happy for her. Immediately, she became friends with the entire cheer squad. They loved her, they accepted her right away, and she was a little bit younger than them, but that didn't really make a difference. And suddenly, Emma seemed to catch the eye of the star wide receiver football player from their high school football team. Let's meet Riley Gall, player number 8. Growing up, people never really thought too much of him. He was described as a bit nerdy and sort of an average kid. In high school, he dove headfirst into football, and that was when everyone identified him as a football or sports junkie, and that just kind of became his thing. No one really had anything else to think of him but that, because his life was so intertwined in it. With both Riley and Emma being in the same circle, it was only a matter of time until they met. And when they did, Riley pretty much fell head over heels for Emma. She had an amazing personality, beautiful looks, and then also just sit here and think about how amazing and high school picture perfect it would be to be dating a cheerleader as a star wide receiver. When the two first met, Emma was 14 and Riley was 16. Because of Emma's young age, her parents were kind of protective about them hanging out and didn't want them hanging out alone or going out on dates by themselves. Of course, they were able to hang out with friends and they were able to come over to Emma's house and be supervised there, but never one-on-one alone time, at least not for an extended period of time. Emma's mom, Jill, said that within the first couple of months it was fine, Emma was happy, and things seemed to be going well. They wanted to keep a close eye because she was 14, but everything seemed fine. But just shortly after those first couple of months, Emma's friends started to notice a few things. Lauren Hutton, Emma's best friend, said things became very intense between the two. She said each argument was extremely dramatic and definitely didn't need to be taken to those measures. Everything that they were doing was so toxic, and I'm not sure if Emma partook in this, but I know 100% for a fact that Riley used very, very hurtful words when he was upset. And he would say things that if anyone said to me, I don't think I would want to keep them around in my life. At one point, because he was so controlling, he ended up sitting outside of Emma's work and waiting until she got off work, following her home, and making sure that she wasn't doing anything that he didn't know about in the meantime. Like, he would literally just wait outside of her work for hours. Lauren, Emma's friend, also mentioned that Riley never really tried to have any sort of friendship with Emma's friends. And I definitely think that this is a red flag. Maybe it's more of a controlling thing. I don't really know, because I've had previous relationships, not one but multiple, where people don't really have the desire to be friends with my friends, and I'm just gonna tell you now, it's a red flag, avoid it at all costs. I think everyone was kind of already thinking that Riley was extremely controlling, but they were just proven even more so when he started requesting her to change her outfits because he wasn't a fan of what she was wearing. He didn't want someone to see her in an outfit like that, or telling her who she could and couldn't hang out with. And then whenever she wouldn't respond to his texts within minutes or sometimes hours, like, people are busy, we don't always have time to be on our phones 24/7. We're not going to respond all the time. When she wouldn't respond, he started accusing her of cheating and blowing up her phone and starting fights and just starting something out of nothing. I'm actually curious to know what you guys think of this. But with someone like Riley, is that something you think they're doing unintentionally and they absolutely have no idea? Or at this point, do they know exactly what they're doing and exactly how they're manipulating people? When the pair started constantly breaking up and getting back together, that's when Jill and Mark, Emma's parents, got very worried. So I'm going to read a direct quote from Jill, but I believe this quote is very important for the context of this case. It was winter of 2015. I guess he started going back to his ex-girlfriend. There were some things going on whereby he was playing them both, said Jill. Some of the things Riley would say to Emma were absolutely horrific. He became very aggressive and would say things like, I hate you and hate everything about you, and you're the biggest bitch I've ever come into contact with. One horrifying text read, you're dead to me. I'll check the obituary. Fuck you. And Emma's mom actually questioned him about that exact message. And whatever his response was gave Emma's mom the biggest red flag. I'm assuming it was something like, I was just so mad, I couldn't help it, but obviously it doesn't mean anything. And I think if you're saying those types of things and genuinely saying it so that the person reading it is hurting from those words, there's like something needs to change. And so I think her mom definitely saw that. After every rude text though came a quick apology. Emma, I'm so sorry for however I act, one message said from Riley. I love you more than words can describe, said another. But unfortunately, those messages didn't mean a thing because he was still mentally abusing her and just using those messages to keep her there. After this, her mom was able to see all sorts of red flags from the beginning of the relationship up until now. And so her parents decided to try to set limits on how often the two could see each other. They even took away Emma's phone, which is crazy. Usually in these situations, people will retaliate and that'll make them want to see the person even more. But I think Emma was starting to get the idea that she wasn't happy anymore and she was being manipulated. I think it was really starting to get into her head that something needed to change. They had pretty much put her on house arrest. No phone, couldn't leave the house, and if she did leave the house, they were following her to wherever she was going, school or work, and following her back home. And this was all in an effort to get their Emma back. However, Riley wasn't willing to give up all contact with Emma and wasn't okay with what her parents were doing. So he got an iPod Touch and he gave that to Emma for them to continue communicating. Despite all of their on-again, off-again-ness, the couple was still together by fall of 2016. Riley moved away to attend college because, as I had mentioned earlier, he was 2 years older than Emma and it was about time for him to move on and go to college and pursue his football career there. They tried for a few weeks while he was at college, but then Emma decided to call it quits. Riley, however, as we could have all guessed, didn't take the breakup well at all. But Emma seemed to be doing extremely well for herself. Her family and friends said that she started to get her bubbly personality back, that she was joining her family for dinner again, that she was spending time with her brother. She just started seeming like the bubbly Emma they always knew. And she was doing great until she checked Riley's Snapchat story one night and saw him with a bunch of girls, which made her extremely upset. And I'm not entirely sure what the situation was, what the Snapchat was. I can't really speak much on that. All I know is that she did see his Snapchat and got very upset, and things just started going back downhill for her, at least temporarily. Things weren't going so well for Riley either though. He had actually attempted to commit suicide in his dorm room. He swallowed a handful of Vicodin and washed it down with alcohol. I don't know who found him, who saved him, or what the situation was surrounding that, but what I do know is that no one should feel like they need to commit suicide, and if you see someone in your life struggling, make sure to reach out and see if you can get them the help that they may need. But with that being said, his friends were extremely worried about him, and I guess he was fine because he continued on, but I seriously could not find any information as to how he survived that. Like, it's ridiculous. That is a lot to do to your body. Many of his friends witnessed his mood swings. He would be off to the side moping and saying things like, "Oh, I just feel so depressed, I want to hurt myself," said Riley's friend Alex McCarty, who, by the way, we will learn a lot about more later on, so keep that name in your mind. Although it took a lot of time and a lot of different things to happen for Emma to finally see, she did finally see that she was way better off without Riley. She kind of started seeing his true colors and started wanting to have less to do with him, I guess. Before she met Riley, she had so much going for her and she was so extremely happy. She knew it was time to get her life back together. She was committed to staying away from him in an effort to patch up her life he had tried so hard to tear down. As I'm sure you guys can tell, there's already a lot of toxicity in this relationship, but the events that I'm about to share with you are a lot more crazy details. On Friday of November 18th, 2016, Emma was at a friend's house celebrating a high school football victory. At around 11:30, one of her really close friends, Zach, arrived, and as soon as he got there, her phone actually started blowing up with messages. So she pulled him aside and they decided to take a look at what she was getting. All of the texts were from an unknown number and were all extremely hostile. The first few were pretty much telling her that they had kidnapped someone she loved and cared about, and that she had to go outside alone in order to protect or save them. One text read, "Go to your car with your keys, go alone, I've got someone you love, if you don't comply, I will hurt them." A few others read, "We have him now. If you don't care about him anymore, then it shouldn't bother you. Call the police and he dies. Your choice. If you'd like to hear his final screams, give me a call. He's in a ditch beside the house. It's a shame you can all of a sudden not value someone else's life." That is the most manipulative thing I have ever seen. Like, that is mind-blowing. This could be a freaking movie because it's so manipulative. Like, this reminds me of, what's it called? You on Netflix. So wild. Like, who does that? Emma genuinely thought that this was one of Riley's friends trying to play a prank on her, so she responded saying she was going to call the cops and to tell Riley to stop or whatever. And that's just when the text got more and more hostile. I don't think there's reports of all of the texts, but I know that towards the end of things, they were very, very aggressive. Emma decided it was time to make a move. No more texting. So obviously anyone in their right mind wouldn't go outside alone, and I probably wouldn't go outside with one other person either, but Emma went outside with her friend Zach to kind of check out what was going on. When they stepped outside, they found Riley laying on the ground nearby. He looked a little tousled up, and he was laying on the ground and sat up, holding the back of his head as if he had just gotten hit extremely hard. Emma, obviously confused, asked him why he was there, what he was doing, and he was trying to convince her that he had been kidnapped. He had no idea where he was. These people took him in a van and beat him up and threw him out, and they, I guess, contacted Emma to come get him, which obviously none of this made any sense. Being scared, overwhelmed, and probably not sure what to believe, Emma yells and says, "We just broke up, leave me alone," according to her friend Zach. And Riley walked off down the street alone and immediately called his best friend Noah. The call to Noah Walton was basically explaining what had just happened. He told him he had been kidnapped, he had no idea what was going on, he ended up outside of some random house, and he needed help. His friend knew that there was something off about this and didn't necessarily believe him and just kept telling him to call the cops, and they can deal with it and they can figure out who did it, because obviously there was something off here. But Riley refused. "I'm sorry, but if I got kidnapped and that happened to me, I would for sure want the police involved." The next morning, Sunday, November 20th, Emma was at home, and I'm assuming both of her parents were at work, otherwise she would have asked one of them for help. But she started hearing someone aggressively knocking on the door and circling the house, and she started to get really worried that there may be a stalker or someone there to break in or harm her. She texted in her group chat, "I'm home alone and somebody in all black walked down my street, came to my door, rang the doorbell over and over again. I thought I was going to die." Because she was so terrified and Riley was fresh in her mind from the night before, she decided to text him. She said, "I hate you, but I really need you right now." His response was, "I'm coming, hold on, I'm speeding." What's so terrifying about this entire situation is, if you guys aren't aware yet, it's clearly Riley doing all of this to Emma, the fake kidnapping and the fake stalking. So Riley is making her so scared in her own home, and then she calls him for help, and so then he just sits there and kicks rocks until enough time has passed where it makes sense for him to have driven over there, and then he shows up as her knight in shining armor, and she feels safe and protected from the one person who's actually trying to harm her. It's so ridiculous. So that morning, Emma was actually supposed to meet up with her mom, and because Emma never showed, her mom went back to the house and pulled up to the driveway to see Emma and Riley with each other standing in the driveway. Obviously, her mom is infuriated, but she is a mom, she has to keep her cool. She walks over to the both of them and calmly tells Riley that he needs to leave. And he tries to explain that Emma called him, he's there to help, he's not any harm, and she just repeats herself, "It's time for you to go, you're not supposed to be here," and so he leaves. Emma was visibly shaken up and at this point didn't even know what to think as to what was going on. It could have been a burglar, it could have been a stalker. There were 2 incidents in 2 days and it was stressing her out. But Jill, her mom, wasn't nearly as shaken up because she was kind of putting a few things together. She actually asked Emma, "Don't you think it's strange that both of these occurrences happened with Riley in the vicinity?" She actually said to Emma, "Don't you find it odd that Riley was involved or appeared at both events?" To which Emma replied, "No, it wasn't him, Mom, it wasn't him." And that just makes me so sad because obviously, like, when you're that young and you think you're in love with someone, you want nothing more than for them to be the person for you. And she probably had an inkling but didn't want to think or believe it was him, is my guess. Because Jill and Mark were so concerned for their daughter at this point, like literally all this stuff is going on and they feel like they have no control over her safety, they decide to have her back on home arrest, and they even go as far as following her to her drive to work, watching her walk in work, driving back over there when she's done with her shift, driving back home with her, and anything like that. They really weren't letting her out of their sight. And even when they were at work with her, like watching her walk to work, it's not like they were just watching. They would park their car too and get out and walk with her. They wanted her to be safe, and they wanted her to feel safe. As a parent, that's part of your job, is to make your kids feel safe and comfortable, and she clearly was still very shaken up. By the end of Sunday night, things seemed to be back to normal and everything had kind of calmed down. Everyone was getting ready for bed, and around 11:30, Emma texted her friend for a few homework questions, which I also think gives you kind of like an idea of what her mindset would be like. I think if she were still freaking out, she wouldn't really be texting her friend about homework assignments. She'd probably be like, hey, things went well today, but I'm still nervous about tomorrow because the stalker or whatever it may be could always be around. She would just maybe scared and wanting to talk about that stuff. But no, she was talking about her homework. She was ready to like move forward and not focus on the stuff in her past because she didn't want anything to do with it. Pretty much in my head, it seemed like Emma is a very strong person and wasn't gonna let someone else's it ruined her entire day. The next morning, November 21st, 2016, at 6 a.m., Jill, Emma's mom, went into her room to wake her daughter up for school. She shook her daughter's leg to wake her up, but she wouldn't, and that's when she looked at Emma's face. Immediately, with looking at Emma's face, she knew Emma was dead. She immediately called 911, and they sent out a team of people ASAP. Her mom states that she doesn't remember a ton of details from that morning or really the rest of that day, and it's probably because her mind and body went into shock. I know myself personally, I've experienced moments of trauma that my mind blocks out for my own benefit, and it's probably the same thing here. So I can't even begin to imagine where her mother's head was at. Let's go ahead and take a second to listen to the 911 call.
I just tried to wake up my daughter for school, and she has no pulse.
You said that she's non-responsive?
Yeah.
After the call was placed, police were sent to the location, and I don't want to butcher this, so I am going to read this name correctly. The Knox County Deputy Sheriff, Nikki Buells, said the call originally came in as a possible suicide. Nikki, being the first to arrive on the scene, started taking photos of everything. First taking photos of outside, nothing too unusual, no break-in, nothing like that, but as soon as she gets to Emma's room, she starts taking a few more detailed pictures because this is where Emma's body was found. She found what appeared to be a bullet hole in the wall. At this point, she knew it wasn't a suicide and she needed to call in some extra help. She decided to continue focusing on the inside of the house, and one of her partners, Knox County Sheriff's Lieutenant Alan Merritt, arrived on the scene and he focused on the outside. One of the very first things he noticed was there were 2 shell casings outside. So 2 shots had to have been fired. But at this point, we've only seen 1 bullet hole. After starting here and walking the perimeter of the entire house, he ended up on this side of the house and noticed another bullet hole in the wall. Both were about the size of a ballpoint pen and shot at about shoulder height. At first, police genuinely had no idea who would want to do this to such a beautiful young girl. Maybe they thought it was someone who was jealous or something along those lines, and they were truly trying to figure out what this could have been before they even started the interviews. But as soon as they sat down with a few people, they kept hearing the name Riley Gall, and they knew they had their first suspect. And they really knew they had their first suspect when they interviewed Riley's friends. One thing police got out of interviewing Riley's friends was that he actually texted them right after the crime was committed and asked them if either of them knew how to get fingerprints off of a handgun. His friends kind of freaked out on him, rightfully so, and they were like, hey, that's actually really not chill. Don't ask us that, and also, what the hell? And Riley's response was, yeah, no, I know it's super strange. I thought it was really weird. My roommate asked me and I thought I'd ask around for him just because he couldn't figure it out, trying to make himself seem like so considerate for going out of his way to ask for someone, but really, he's just trying to cover up a murder. Not only did these texts and conversations make him look extremely suspicious, but it also just confirmed that he was in possession of a gun. Luckily, Riley's friends took all the information they had to police and were willing to work with them. Before we go into the whole police thing and taking a little break from all the information that's been thrown at you guys, I kind of want to go over my observations of Riley as a person, because I've investigated a few cases like this and looked into plenty of different cases that I may have not investigated for this specific reason, but over the time, I've seen a lot of patterns, and one pattern in particular that I want to talk about is one that I see here with Riley. He was a cute guy in high school, everyone liked him, he had multiple girls after him. I believe he was extremely confident, cocky, and conceited. He felt as if he knew everything, he was extremely smart, and his truth was the only truth. And this is kind of where that whole pattern fits into play. Riley was so over the top sure in himself that he wouldn't get caught in this situation that he didn't really cover all of his grounds. He never in a million years thought he would be caught because of how cocky he was. Immediately after Riley found out Emma had passed away, he tweeted up a storm. In a slew of tweets, which have now since been deleted, he went on and on about how much he loved Emma, constantly saying the word love and how much he loved and cared for her. One tweet in particular read, "Rest easy now, sweetheart. I love you forever and always." I genuinely believe that those were posted to try to throw people off. Like, why else would he post them? His friend Alex McCarty said, "He ended up telling me that he was so fearful for his life, he had stolen his grandfather's gun and he showed it to me. I was very worried, and he reassured me over and over again that he was the farthest thing from suicidal. He was just so scared of these people who were out to get Emma." Basically trying to set up this whole story that he was under attack too, so that's why he had the gun. At least to his friends, but to himself, his goal was to scare Emma over these next few days into running right back into his arms. So basically, the stalker made Emma concerned for her safety, and Riley was always conveniently right there for her rescue. If this all was true and accurate and none of this was made up, then neither of them would have issues with telling the police. That's all I'm gonna say. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, the person feels overly confident and they think that they can easily weasel their way out of any sticky situation. Monday, November 21st, the same day that Emma passed away, detectives brought in Riley for questioning. I think at this point they knew pretty much in their heads a rough idea of what happened, but they needed to talk to him, see if they could get answers out of him, and if not, then they needed to figure out how they could get these answers. They began the interview by asking him just a simple, "What were you up to for the last 72 hours?" And he said a few things here and there, like staying the night at a friend's place, which was never confirmed, by the way. And then the rest of the stuff he just couldn't remember. That's all he kept saying is, "I don't know, I can't remember. I was just relaxing, I guess," or doing whatever, just not any answer or any alibi or anything like that, just couldn't remember. And I think that's so weird. It's not like they're asking about 2 years ago, they're asking about the last 2-3 days. It's not that hard to remember. Like yesterday, I know exactly what I ate. The day before, know exactly what I ate. It's really not that hard. I know who I hung out with, what I did, and if something seemed off, especially like all the stalking stuff going on, I would for sure be a lot more alert during that time, and I would have kind of like a mental log of everything that happened that weekend. Before we get into a few interview clips, I just want to preface it by saying I think a lot of these clips speak for themselves. There is one thing that I'm going to say about these interview clips. So the thing to look out for is that he never refers to Emma as Emma. He calls her the girl, my ex, or even the girl who was killed, but never Emma. I only saw one time throughout that entire interview when he said Emma, and it was because the police physically made him say Emma.
It was traumatizing. I didn't know what to make of it. Went up to my stepdad's house, and I pulled in the driveway, and this van pulled over across in the semicircle, and these two guys were like walking across the street. Next thing I know, one of them grabs my back, and the other one's around the corner, and they just like put their hands over my face and just took me to their van or whatever.
Why would somebody do that to you?
I genuinely have no idea. They did ask me, they were like, who would you want to talk to for the last time? And so I started freaking out, and I said Emma, and they made me call Emma, and I was just crying, screaming. She thought it was a joke. She thought I was playing a prank on her. And that's when she FaceTime called me. She was crying and freaking out. So I said, okay, give me a minute. I'll come down there and check it out. The only thing that I thought of was whoever the person was at her house Saturday morning. That's the first thing I thought of. So I was like, what are you talking about? Did you not hear what happened? I said, no, what are you talking about? The girl, she texted me.
Which girl?
The one that passed away.
Okay. What's her name?
Emma. I hope to God I'm not a suspect in her death.
Did I say you were?
I hope you don't think it, because I wouldn't hurt that girl for... I would hurt myself before I hurt her, and that's what I've done.
Why in the world would he be the first person to name himself as a suspect? No one in that room was like, we think you did it, why'd you do it, trying to get those types of answers. He was like, I hope to God you don't think I did it, which just makes him look so suspicious. After he left the interview, he blew up his friends' phones because he knew that they talked to police, he knew that they gave them information that he didn't want them to have, and he was pretty upset with them. He kept repeating that because of them he's gonna go to prison, he looks suspicious, he looks like he did it, but in all reality it's truly because of himself. At this point, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex and Noah had already agreed to work with the police to help them get anything that they needed for this case. They knew he had something to do with it, without a doubt, and if anyone was gonna get the slightest bit of information out of him, it was going to be his two best friends. Together, Alex and Noah went to the police and started a sting operation. And I think this is the first case that I've covered with a sting operation in it. So for those of you who don't know what it is, I will give you guys a little breakdown. This is literally a direct quote. I could sit here and describe it, but I'm going to do like a quote of exactly what it means because my brain is so exhausted because I have filmed 3 videos today and did all this research and I'm brain dead. So give me a little bit of a break, but this is what a sting operation is. A sting operation is where an undercover police officer or a person who knows the criminal personally goes undercover and plays along as if they will help the criminal commit the crime or cover up the crime. The police are listening in the entire time and use this information in order to get proof of wrongdoing or guilt. This is done for many different crimes, for example, organized crime or mob activity, human trafficking, drug cartels, and in this case, murder and an attempt to cover it up. I think that it takes a lot of guts to be able to come forward and work with the police like that. That's definitely putting your own life in risk too, considering you know that he is capable of killing. The Tuesday night after Emma's death, the sting operation was on. Both friends were wired, had transmitters, and even a little hidden camera on a key fob to record everything that they were about to do. The goal for this sting operation was to recover the murder weapon, or at the very least get enough information to get a search warrant or something of those sorts. Alex and Noah invite Riley over to play some video games, hang out, and just catch up. It's been clearly a long week and there's been a lot of tension. They just need a chill and relaxed night. They start discussing what's been going on in the case with the Walker family, and I'm going to insert clips here and there that I want you guys to pay attention to or I think that are important from these conversations that they were having with him. And keep in mind, because this was a sting operation, all of this footage is being gathered from this little key fob.
I'm sorry about him, dog. I want to be so upset and I can't because I'm more worried about getting arrested and putting away for murder that I didn't commit. And never in my life would I kill someone that I love that much.
Love you, bro. It sucks you gotta deal with all this, man.
I'm trusting you guys, like, with my life, because, I mean, this is 70 years in jail if I get convicted of something I didn't do.
So why can't you just give him a gun?
It just needs to be gone. For whatever reason, it just needs to be gone. You guys don't have to come with me if you don't want to.
I mean, I got your back, man.
If it's in the Tennessee River, they will never find it.
Okay, those clips are a lot to take in. I know that personally, if in this situation this happened with me or my boyfriend and it did happen to be a complete accident and one of us had passed away, the other one of us would be in crippling pain. And the first thing to mention is that he seems totally chill, and if anything, he seems more worried about himself than anyone else. But other than that, he doesn't seem to have too many worries going on or seem to be too sad. He then also has the audacity to ask his friends to retract their statements, either telling law enforcement that they were drunk, that they were high, that they took LSD, that they were doing something that made this statement incorrect. Basically trying to get his name cleared. And why in the world would his friends do that? Like, they're not idiots, but of course they want to save their asses in this situation, so they say, you know what, you're right, we'll retract our statements. But obviously, Mr. Riley here doesn't know he's being played at this exact moment, and police can hear everything. Riley clearly has a lot mentally going on with him, and I just find it very amusing to me that he thinks he's like the master player and that he can manipulate anyone, but while he's trying to manipulate people, he's being manipulated. So the way that the boys were keeping in contact with law enforcement while this entire sting operation was going on were a few different ways. Obviously, the police could hear and watch what was going on, but if the boys needed to say something specifically to the police without Riley hearing, they would just shoot them a text, which actually is really smart because these are a group of young boys. They're probably all sitting on their phone at one point or another, and so it's not that weird. Eventually, after sitting there for a while and hanging out, Riley brings up the gun and asks his friends if they're willing to help him dispose of it. According to Riley, he initially stole the gun from his grandfather's vehicle, but he hid it at his stepfather's house, so the boys agreed to go with him to his stepfather's house to retrieve it. After picking it up, he wanted to take it down to a place called the Bluffs, which was by the Tennessee River. It's a local hotspot for teens to arrive in the evening and leave in the early hours the next morning. Also, it's notorious for partying, drinking, and getting high. And according to Riley, the perfect spot to dispose of a murder weapon. After Riley came up with their plan, one of the boys texted the police officers, letting them know what was happening, and obviously they could hear all of it going on, but they wanted a text stream to be sure. So they text them letting them know what's going on, and they all pile up into Alex's car and head out. The police had several undercover cars trailing them, which I was trying to think about if I were ever in a situation like that and I had undercover cars trailing me. First off, I'm always a paranoid person, so I might notice it, but at the same time, if I am as cocky as Riley seems to be, I don't think I would notice it. I think I'd just be so in my own head, not worried about my surroundings, and that also bit him in the ass. The one issue that the police had during this entire sting operation was they had to keep within a certain distance, and if they lost that distance, they lost connection to hear what they were saying, have video recording what they were saying. All this stuff was being saved automatically, but they couldn't listen in at that given moment. They would have to go back and listen. And obviously they wanted to be kept up to date as much as possible. They arrive at the first location, which is Riley's stepfather's house, and Riley refuses to let anyone go inside with him. Pretty quickly after entering the home, he walks right back out with a giant black trash bag that's filled about halfway. He gets back into the car and is kind of acting like nothing happened, and both of his friends are kind of hinting and trying to get him to show him what's in the bag, show him the gun, you know, see what they can get him to say. Riley doesn't really say anything. So Alex and Noah turn on the radio, they start singing, making some jokes here and there, just having some conversation, and trying to lighten the mood so that it's not so heavy. The three guys pull into an apartment complex and park. I tried looking up where this apartment complex was and I couldn't really find many details about it. I'm assuming though it was somewhere that had easy parking to have access to the Bluffs. I don't really know the entire situation why they went there instead of directly to the Bluffs, but nonetheless, they arrive at this apartment complex, park, and that's when things get a little hectic. Riley starts preparing to dispose of the weapon, and it is almost as if he's going into surgery. He has 2 white gloves in his black trash bag, and he's putting them on so meticulously and so carefully to make sure to not get any extra DNA anywhere, and he's just really thinking all of this out, literally as if he's about to go into surgery. His friends don't know 100%, but they said there's just absolutely no way that this wasn't planned or premeditated in some way, shape, and or form. Inside the trash bag were several pieces of black clothing, presumably the clothes that he used to be her stalker and also the clothes that he probably used when he killed her. He then pulls out the murder weapon and is acting so casual about it, it's actually terrifying. His friends, you can hear them in the recording, are like, oh my god, that's real. And they're kind of scared, and Riley doesn't say anything. He's just like, yeah.
Oh my god. this is a real gun.
His friends knew it was time to tell the police to raid the scene, so they sent the text, and within 5 to 10 minutes, the police took over. The police sprang into action, and the entire raid squad took down this entire situation in 90 seconds. There is a little bit of audio, so I will play it after this, but I unfortunately couldn't find out how many officers were on the scene. But from the recording, it sounded like there definitely had to be more than like 3 at least.
Everybody put your hands out of the vehicle now!
Just pull that bag enough and let's just to see the serial number.
At this point, Riley would just be making the worst decision ever to try to fight against what was going on and to try to escape. So he made, for the first time, the correct decision, and he kept his head down, didn't say a word, and went willingly with the police. When it was finally time to bring this case in front of a courtroom, Riley was finally ready to admit that he committed the crime. His defense lawyer stated it was an act of reckless homicide, basically meaning that Riley was only trying to scare Emma, he was never trying to kill her, and by trying to scare her, he accidentally killed her, which, as we all know, is BS. To quickly go over what we were discussing earlier, so we can disprove this theory, let's take a second look at that diagram. It shows us exactly where the shots were fired, in 2 different spots, not just one. So let's say scaring someone like this is normal. There was plenty of wall space for him to shoot into her room without hitting her or her bed. But both shots were fired directly at her. When you think about it, he had to know the layout of her room. He had been in there so many times before, being outside of the house and shooting exactly where she was sleeping twice screams intent to murder. So I think it's pretty safe to say we can lay that theory to rest. 2 years after Emma's death, it was finally Judgment Day for Riley Gall. Looking at him now, or I guess that day, you would not even recognize him. I truly believe that when someone goes through something like this, something traumatic, or they have gone crazy or had a mental breakdown or whatever it may be, you can see a genuine difference in their face and their body. I've seen it with multiple people, people I know and people I don't know. I definitely think this is a case where Riley kind of lost his marbles, and you can tell on him physically. A once confident Riley Gall stood before the jury as they read their verdict. Everyone wanted him to be charged with as many different things as possible. They wanted him to be put away for as long as possible, just to ensure that he could never do this to another person ever again. And they definitely charged him with a lot, but he does have the opportunity to get out at some point.
In count 1, charging the defendant with first-degree murder, did the jury reach a verdict?
Yes, we did.
What is your verdict?
Guilty.
He ended up being charged with first-degree murder, stalking, tampering with evidence, possession of a firearm, reckless endangerment, and felony murder. All these convictions added up to 51 years in prison with the possibility of parole. I'm not really sure how I feel about this outcome. I don't love it. I definitely wish that he had life in prison without the chance of parole. After Riley was sentenced, he was able to give his apologies to his family and Emma's family, and they just seemed so ingenuine, and I believe that he literally only did it to look like he felt remorseful in the eyes of the law. I don't think that there was any other reason behind him doing it. I don't think he regrets it. After his apologies, Emma's family was able to give their family statement impacts. And if you guys are interested in watching the full versions of the family statement impacts, I will have those linked down below as well. It was so beautiful because at Emma's high school graduation, they graduated her in front of her class and took a moment of silence afterwards to show respect for her. And I just thought that was a really beautiful moment that I felt needed to be mentioned in this video. In the end, this was clearly a planned out murder, and I think the really important lesson to take away from this is to set boundaries when you are dating someone. Don't let someone walk all over you. Don't let someone control you. If they aren't interested in hanging out with your friends or doing certain things and all these red flags are popping up, pay attention to those. Don't let them slide by because it's young, new love. Like, actually pay attention to those, because those are very important, and I cannot, I am 21 and I cannot even tell you how many red flags I've ignored that I wish I freaking didn't. So pay attention to those red flags, please. I will also include a link down below to a site that will tell you some of the signs of a toxic relationship so you can maybe get help or read into it if you're curious if you or someone you know is in one. I know in this situation it's extremely unfortunate because Emma truly tried to end things for good and get him out of her life, and he wouldn't accept that as an answer. One thing to note also before I leave is that a lot of you guys seem to not enjoy when I kind of bag on the police department, but I think in this situation, although it was a solved case, so it's a bit easier to be nicer on them, I think the law enforcement did a beautiful job and they did everything in such a timely manner, and I think this is some of the best work that I've seen. So that was the entire case of Emma Walker and Riley Gall. I'm just still in shock. Like, I get chills every time I even think about it. If I left anything out of this video, like I've said many times previously, please let me know in the comments, and I will make sure that you guys are aware of what I left out so that you guys aren't missing out on any information. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe, and also turn on the little bell notification so you're notified each time I post some videos. All of my social medias, as well as links I may have referenced during this video that you guys could check out about the case, will all be linked down below, so make sure to go check those out. And also, I may or may not be currently doing a giveaway on Instagram, so come say hi. Username's right here. What's up? What's good? All right, love you guys. Bye.